This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rangers through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicoladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
We want to win. It's Seattle Sounders, bro.
Porque se cheated.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Open Cup seriously.
Welcome to a special year-end episode of Soundbites, a mini podcast on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Today is Friday, December 20th, and I am Jeremiah O'Shan. On today's show, I'll be talking about the release of the 2025 schedule, the publishing of each team's General Allocation Money bank, give an update on various rumors surrounding the Sounders, share what I know about the new league's cup format, and give a brief recap of the 2025 SuperDraft. Thursday and Friday, frankly, were pretty busy days for the Sounders, who I get the impression are sort of compressing a lot of stuff into the end of year before they break. There are still definitely some loose ends out there, but Thursday at least and Friday were jam-packed with actual announcements of various things and news breaking and whatnot. So let's just start really at the top. The schedule came out. That's a big one. Obviously, we now have a much better idea of what the 2025 season is going to look like, and it is going to be busy. It's going to be challenging. It's everything. But let's start with some of the positives. Backheeled, that's our partner over at backheeled.com. They did a little study and they analyzed all the start times and whatnot. And they found that there were 50% more games scheduled for Sundays than last year, and the number of Friday games actually tripled. Now, I don't know how many games that actually represents, but it's probably a couple dozen or whatever. So there's more variety in kickoffs. That's kind of what I'm getting at. The Sounders, you can see that pretty clearly. In 8 of their 17 home games are not kicking off at 7:30. And those times range anywhere from noon to 6:30, I think, of those 8 games. That includes 4 afternoon games. Annoyingly, though, one of those non-7:30 games is a Wednesday game against San Diego that is scheduled to start at 5:30. I don't know if that's a mistake or if it's something that's going to be fixed, but the Mariners game starts at 6:40 that day. So I don't really know that starting the Sounders game at 5:30 even alleviates the crush of people that are going to be showing up. I guess the Dodgers are also in town, so there's going to be a bigger crowd than normal. If I'm the Sounders, I'm just going ahead and moving that game to 7:30. Yeah, I realize that people are then arriving at the same time that the Mariners game is getting ready to start, but no one wants a 5:30 kickoff on May 28th. This is a kind of surreal thing, but I don't want to focus too much on the kickoff times. I do think it's good in general that there are more kickoff times. I think there's 3 or 4 Sunday games. So, there's a little bit more variety. I think people, we did a study on Sounder Heart of our readers, and one of the questions we asked them is what they would like to see changed this year. And changing the kickoff times was pretty high up on the list. I'm looking for it right now. And let's see, the more variety of kickoff times, 10% of people I guess it's maybe not as big of a slice as I thought. The number one thing people want to have happen is sign some exciting players. So that got 48%. But these are the kind of this is the 10% of people picked kickoff times as their number one priority. So I guess maybe that is a pretty decent chunk of people. But anyway, most of these kickoff times, from what I was told, were sort of designed around the idea of trying to avoid so many conflicts with the Mariners. Last year, if you went to games, you were quite aware that there were a lot of games that were kicking off, or you were arriving just as Mariners crowd was getting there, and it was kind of a mess. And it was almost impossible to do a Mariners Sounders doubleheader last year. I didn't look deep enough to tell you how many games you could actually pull that off in, but at least they seem to be trying to avoid direct conflicts with the Mariners quite as often this year. But once you get outside of the kickoff times, it gets, it really illustrates how tough a schedule it was. And I don't want to make it sound like the Sounders were somehow picked on or they got a bad draw. I would imagine a lot of teams can make similar complaints, but the reality is the Sounders this is crazy. There are 52 match days currently on their calendar. Now, those are a lot of potential match days, so they might not have to play on all those games. But I did a little kind of, I made a schedule that had all the potential matches in it. And it's not included. That doesn't include Open Cup. It doesn't assume a Club World Cup advancement. And this is before the playoffs. 52 match days. You're talking about almost 2 games a week, or potentially 2 games a week for the entire season, which is just totally wild. But the start of the season is particularly tough. They have 9 of their first 14 regular season games on the road. That doesn't account for the road game that they're already going to be playing at Antigua, and then potentially another 2 games that they're going to play on the round of 16. If they play both of those rounds, they're going to end up playing, I think, 8 matches in the first 5 weeks of the season. It's going to be a tough one. The good news about that first 9 of 14 thing is, well, let me get to the bad part first. It ends that 14 game stretch ends with a 3 road game week that is going to be tough. It's going to start in Houston, then they're going to go down to LAFC at midweek, and then they're going to close on the road at Portland. Those are 3 tough games, even if you're not playing them all back to back to back. But the good news, I suppose, is that they have 5 home games during that 14-week stretch. And I would say 4 of them are very winnable, very winnable. The 5th one, I don't know, maybe this is good, maybe this is bad, but the 5th one is at home against LAFC. And that is probably going to be sandwiched between the round of 16 legs, which are most likely going to be Cruz Azul. If the Sounders are in that, there's a really good chance they are going to rotate the lineup against LAFC, which even at full strength, LAFC has been a tough one for the Sounders. They haven't beaten them at home in a long time. I want to say 2020, maybe 2021 was the last time they beat them at home. It's been tough. And then, as tough as the beginning of the schedule is, the end of the season may be even tougher. So they come out of Leagues Cup and they have 6 games remaining after Leagues Cup, which we'll talk about later. I was able to break some news about the changing format of Leagues Cup, but we'll get to that later. So they're going to come out of Leagues Cup and they have 6 games left. Those 6 games are maybe their toughest stretch of the season. It's going to be tough. So this is how it goes. So they start with a 3-game week where they're going to be at home against the Galaxy. That's the reigning MLS Cup champions, in case you forgot. Then they go on the road to Inter Miami on a Tuesday, weirdly. That's the defending Supporters Shield winners, probably featuring Messi, I would assume. And then they go on the road against Austin, where is a place they've actually played pretty well. But Austin in September, I guess it's probably September, going to be hot. So you got to factor that in there. So then that's 3 of the games. And then the final 3 games are back to back. I don't love this. This is maybe these 3 games might be the most annoying part of the schedule. Maybe not the toughest, but the most annoying part of the schedule, because they go back to back home Cascadia Cup games against Vancouver and Portland, which I just don't love that the home Cascadia Cup games are both it is a balanced Cascadia Cup schedule. I think that's good, but I don't like that their only 2 home games are pushed all the way to the back of the season. So they go at home against Vancouver and then at home against Portland. And then there's an international break. So they have a week off. And then they close on the road against New York City FC. So this is, I think, only the second or third time ever that they've closed on the road. They also, I guess they closed at St. Louis a couple years ago. So it's closing on the road is whatever. Playing interconference, that's tough. This is the only interconference game that's being played on decision day, but there has to be one game that's intraconference, because there's now 30 teams, 15 in each conferences. So that just creates a scenario where there's always, every week, there's going to be a cross conference game. And the Sounders drew the short straw. But what's really tough is that this is the longest league road trip that they're going to take all year. I was a little surprised to learn that, because I assumed Atlanta was farther away. They also have to go to Atlanta. But yeah, I looked it up, and New York City is technically is like 300 miles farther by plane. I guess Atlanta is farther west than I realized. This country that we have is strange. People were telling me it's the curvature of the earth. I'm not a cartographer. I don't know if that's why. I was just surprised. I felt like Atlanta would probably be farther away, but it's not. New York City is the farthest road trip that the Thunder is going to take. For those interested, the other they have 3 Eastern Conference road trips. The third one is against Nashville, which might be kind of a fun road trip. In fact, all 3 of these road trips in a vacuum, kind of neat. Going to New York City, going to Miami, going to Nashville. You can definitely do worse than that in terms of away games. So anyway, that's a tough decision day. I would really hope the Sounders have the playoff positioning or whatever that they need before they go into that game. But the schedule makers didn't do a lot of favors for the Sounders this time. All right. Well, the other big piece of news that came out on Thursday was MLS. And I don't know, it's kind of weird that MLS decided to release these 2 things, the schedule, and they published how much GAM each team has. That's General Allocation Money. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume that you have some basic understanding of GAM, but I will go ahead and give you the 20,000 foot explanation of GAM. GAM is essentially a way to expand the salary cap, but unlike just adding money on the salary cap, it is tradable. You can acquire more of it. You get awarded it for various reasons. If you transfer a player out of the league and you make money on it, you can convert that into GAM. So anyway, it's salary cap space, essentially, that is tradable, that is a asset, essentially. So anyway, for the first time ever, for a long time, we've had no idea how much GAM any team had, let alone how much GAM was swimming around in the whole system. And MLS, essentially, in an attempt to continue to get more transparent in the way that they operate, which I think is a absolutely crucial element to making MLS more popular, is they're making it easier for people like me, super fans, whatever, journalists, everyone, to just have an idea of what we're talking about when they say they're trading allocation money. That used to be, they didn't even tell you. It wasn't that long ago. They wouldn't even disclose how much allocation money was changing hands. We had no idea how much, what allocation money was even worth. So we've made some progress over the years. But anyway, they released this list, and then almost immediately it was old news, because it was already out of date. So this was as of December 10th. They didn't release it until December 19th. So it was already 9 days old by the time they released it. So there had been plenty of time for people to make moves. There was a bunch of moves made in there. But best I can tell, the Sounders actually were even out of date by the time this came out. We found out today why that was. They had traded 2 international roster spots to the New York Red Bulls for $350 in general allocation money, 300 of it in this year, 50,000 next year. Anyway, that brings the Sounders' total amount of allocation money that they have available to spend to 4.5 million, give or take a few bucks here and there. That's, I think, the sixth most. They were ninth most as of yesterday. I don't think any of the teams that were above them made any other acquisitions. So I'm pretty sure they moved all the way up to six. So that's kind of notable that the Sounders have that much general allocation money, and it kind of speaks to the way that they're building their roster right now. Again, we'll get to this bit later. But so this is not a perfect thing. It would be really great if there was like an online real-time calculator that showed you exactly how much each team had, and you could kind of work out trades on your own and do all kinds of fun stuff like that. Maybe even have a salary cap that is accessible. We still don't know exactly how everyone hits the salary cap. That is one of the frustrations. That would be another fun way to, sort of let us armchair general manage all these teams, is if there was an online calculator that showed you how much salary cap space each team has. And the main thing we don't know in that case is, well, we don't know how much each player hits the cap, because even though the players union publishes the salaries for every player and their guaranteed compensation, apparently the league and the players union disagree on the best way to calculate that. And so they aren't publishing that. Then there's also these various taxes that get added in. There's other acquisition costs that get added into a player's salary cap hit. So it's not we can't get into the exact science. We don't know exactly how much salary cap space they have. I did go ahead and make some best guesses. And weirdly enough, I think the Sounders have almost exactly the amount of salary cap space as they have general allocation money. My back of the envelope calculation is that the Sounders have about $4.5 million of cap space remaining. Now, there are a lot of undetermined pieces that still have to go in. Albert Rusnak is still unsigned. João Paulo is unsigned. There's still all these rumors about Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola coming in. None of that is factored into this 4.5 million, but it should be enough to add those players and potentially do some more. So that's all really good news. But we also the other thing that was nice about this whole list is that it really illustrates how much discrepancy there is within the league. So the team with the most general allocation money is Atlanta United. They had something like 6 million in GAM, and the team with the least is the Houston Dynamo, who only have 2 million. That's $4 million of cap spending that Atlanta can spend more. I mean, that's a pretty big difference. And we've always known that teams can outspend each other, but really that was focused on specific areas of the roster. The thing about general allocation money is that can be spent on virtually any part of the roster at all. So, having a $4 million advantage, especially when you're talking about so the difference in their salary cap essentially is Atlanta United has about $16 million to spend on the salary cap, and Houston Dynamo only have about 12 million. You're talking about a 33% difference in terms of how much more Atlanta can spend. That's a huge advantage. And then there's other ways of. We'll also add that this is not factoring in whether a team has declared that they're going to be a 2 DP and 4 U22 team, in which case they will get $2 million of extra, or they don't get it. They can buy $2 million of extra GAM, or be a 3 and 3 team, which is the 3 DPs and 3 U22s. I'm pretty sure all indications from the Sounders are that they are probably going to be a 3 DP, 3 U22 team. So, what I'm sort of imagining is going to happen is Jordan Morris will probably be a DP at the start of the year, and they'll use him sort of as an accounting mechanism that allows them to save a bunch of GAM and potentially spend it elsewhere. And then maybe they'll make a bigger move in the summer. My hope is that they're going to at least sign another TAM player on top of, I'll get. I guess we may as well transition into this now. We've talked about this on Nos Audietes, but the Sounders are been rumored to be trying to make a couple of different trades for Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola from FC Dallas. I have been asking about this almost daily to my sources, and the latest that I've heard and this is a little counter to what I've seen in the national media, but from what I understand is the Ferreira deal is really close to happening, and it could get announced at any moment. And they are the expectation is they're going to bring him. They're going to get him signed to an extension. That's been the main thing that they've been struggling with, is coming to personal terms. I guess the trade terms were agreed to a while ago, so that's not been the issue. It's been whether or not Ferreira is willing to not be a DP anymore, and so the Sounders would want to sign him to an extension. And I guess it sounds like that's going to happen. Nothing official, but it looks like that's going to happen.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
And so the DPs at the start of the year will probably be Pedro de la Vega, Jordan Morris, and Albert Rusnak, who it does sound like is going to re-sign and is probably going to re-sign as a DP. I think the Sounders were hoping to maybe get him in as a TAM player and have a little bit more flexibility, but it doesn't sound like that's probably going to happen. They still like him, though, so they want to bring him back. Anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down in that. And so I don't know that the Arriola trade is going to happen. I think the hang up there is Dallas just doesn't really want to eat as much of his salary as the Sounders needed them to. Basically, the Sounders were going to ask them to pick up basically $1 million of his salary. I think they probably would have been able to use a buyout and just take that off their books, but maybe they're not willing to do that after all. And the Sounders really apparently are not that interested in bringing Arriola in at anything more than about $500,000 or $600,000. They didn't want him to be a TAM player, essentially. And that would basically to get him below TAM would cost at least $1 million for Dallas. Dallas would have to keep at least $1 million in order to keep him from being a TAM player. So I don't know if that's going to happen. My understanding was the Sounders were probably just going to give Dallas a first-round draft pick. That was going to be a pretty easy deal from that perspective. But it would be a nice pickup if they can do it. The Ferreira one, I'm pretty bullish on him. I know that a lot of fans are sort of down on this trade. They don't get it. I think they get it, but they're not excited by the prospect of bringing in a player who is perceived to sort of be damaged goods right now. He is coming off a year that he wasn't very good. He was hurt a lot of the year. He only scored 5 goals last year, and mainly he just was injured for a lot of the season. And what I say, I look at this as a player who has 53 goals. He's not yet 24 years old. This is an unprecedented number of goals for anyone in MLS history. I've used this stat before, but he is, Chris Wondolowski had something like 7 goals going into his age 27 season. That's his first really big year. And Ferreira is on 53 goals before he turns 24. I mean, this is a guy, if he spends his whole career in MLS, he might score 200 goals. And I would think the Sounders, by picking him up, don't really think that he's going to spend his career in MLS. I mean, he's got sell potential still. This is a player who was last January, there was a deal to send him to Spartak Moscow for like $13 million. He started a World Cup game for the United States at 22 years old. He had an 18 goal season. Again, I realize at 22, so it's, a couple years ago, but he was an outstanding. I mean, he's one of the top prospects to ever come out of MLS at one point. He's still only 24 years old. I really like him. Now, I think the trick is, how do you fit him along with Jordan Morris, who they both want to be nines? I mean, this is, there is some flexibility in the way that Ferreira plays. He could kind of be a more withdrawn forward. He can maybe be a 10 in a pinch. I suppose you can play him on the wing, but that's not his bread and butter. He's really a number 9, sort of in the same way that Jordan is really, at least Jordan is probably more flexible, frankly. Like, it would be easier to put Jordan out wide than it would be to put Ferreira out wide. But I think what we're going to see is them doing a variety of things. I think we'll see them start up top together. The Sounders will probably run them 3-5-2. They will do it gives them a lot more flexibility. And I really like them. And I've said this a few times, but if you told me that this was a Colombian international, 24 years old, coming off already 53 goals in a top flight league, he would go for $8 million. I don't have any question about that. If the Sounders paid $8 million for Jesus Ferreira, the guy who's coming from Colombia, I think that's people are super excited about it. I think that they would be into this big time. So I do think it's a little bit of anti-MLS self-loathing, so to speak, to be as down on this player as so many fans are. I understand that it's not the most ambitious move. This is essentially a free move from a money out of their pocket perspective. It's maybe not the most ambitious move. I understand that frustration. I want the Sounders to go big too. And I realize that this is not the move that's going to get the fan base on its own excited. I do think that if Ferreira plays well, that people will get excited, and maybe that will be the effect. But I understand the criticism of this being sort of like a cheap move, but that doesn't make it a bad move. And I think it's important to differentiate those two things. He is someone who has some real upside. I think I am like, the more I think about it, the more I'm excited I am. The thing that worries me at this point is that if the deal falls through, I don't know how much flexibility the Sounders have. It will be interesting to see. I suppose they can still go out and make a big signing if they want. I hope they haven't gone too far down the road of not doing that. So, we'll see. We will see. My understanding is that the Sounders aren't going to be. I know there's some reports out there about how they're going to have to give up like $2 million, $3 million in GAM. I do not think that's accurate at all. What I've heard is that they are going to give up sort of assorted assets. And today the Sounders made a trade that sent, I talked about this earlier in the show. They sent the Red Bulls 2 international roster spots. I sort of assumed those 2 international roster spots would have been included in a trade for Ferreira. My assumption is that maybe Dallas is like, we don't want the international spots, but we do want the money those are worth. We just don't want to deal with having to find a partner for these international roster spots. And then they think it will look better on paper, probably. And they're right. No question. It looks better on paper for them to get $350,000 in allocation money than it looks to get 2 international roster spots. So maybe that's what's going on there. I think the Sounders are probably going to give up a player. I don't want to speculate too much on which player that is, but I don't think it is a Josh Atencio, Reed Baker Whiting, certainly like Obed Vargas. None of these guys who are really core parts of their build, are not going to be included in this trade. At least that's my understanding. So I think this is a relatively buy low type of situation. Anyway, I've got 2 more bits. This is going a little longer than I had anticipated, but the Sounders are going to be probably participating. We actually don't know this for sure. It has not been announced who is participating, but my understanding is there's going to be a new leagues. The league announced that there is going to be a new Leagues Cup format. That was another thing that they just announced this week. That was on Wednesday. And then I did a little bit more reporting, and I was able to find out the framework of the format. So we know that the tournament is going to be held from July to August, and it's going to be played concurrently with the season, which I don't know if it makes it better. They're going to have to play, like, the tournament's still going to have a ton of games, and it's just going to make for a really busy schedule, but it's kind of pitched as being better. I don't know if that's true. They made it sound like this is what everyone wants, is us to play during the season. I don't know about that, but this is kind of interesting. So I assumed when I heard that they were doing this in season tournament that it was going to be single elimination and be pretty straightforward. You'd have 18 teams you'd figure out a way to format 18 teams in a single elimination. We did this thing on Sounder at Heart where we figured, oh, maybe there's going to be 4 play-in games and whatever. They'll figure it out. No, turns out that's not what they're going to be doing. What I'm been told is that they're going to use what's called the Swiss method. And this is basically most recognized as the format that they're using in the European club the Europa League, CONCACAF, or not CONCACAF, Conference League, I think it's called, and most notably UEFA Champions League. And so the way it works is that instead of groups, they have what they call leagues. And in this case, I'm not going to get into how it works in Europe, but the way it's going to work here is that you're going to have 2 18-team leagues. You got Liga MX and you'll have MLS, and you'll have 18 teams in each. And each team will be drawn against either 3 or 4 teams from the other league, and they'll play each one of those teams again, like once. And so you'll either play 3 or 4 games in the league stage, and then they'll have standings at the end of the league stage, and the teams with the 4 most points will advance to the quarterfinals. Presumably, the first round of the quarterfinals will feature, the first place MLS team against the 4th place Liga MX team, and sort of they'll go on through that. And then I don't know, I would imagine after in the semifinals and in the finals, it will just be whoever's advancing, and it's not so hung up on league versus league. But it definitely is a different style. I don't think we've seen this in the United States at all. I certainly, when I first heard of the Champions League doing it, I was really confused. But it's not super confusing, and it'll be interesting. I don't know. It is definitely more Liga MX versus MLS games. There's no question about that. That is I do think that's true. That's the whole point of this thing. So we should be enhancing the number of times the leagues face off against one another. I think that fixture congestion is a real issue here, especially if they're going to try to play 4 league stage games. You would end up playing 80 matches in this tournament. You would have teams playing up to 7 matches, which I guess is the same as it used to be. But every team would play at least one more game in this format than they played in the old format. Again, the guarantee, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but it is definitely going to be a strain on rosters. I think we can say that pretty clearly. And I don't know how much more appealing this is to fans. It does seem like after, Leagues Cup has now gone through 4 formats, I believe, maybe even 5 formats. The one that the Sounders went to the final of, it was a pretty simple 8-team draw. I think it was 8 teams, and maybe it was 16 teams. And they just played a single elimination. The Sounders played, it must have been 8 because the Sounders played 3 games in that tournament, all against Liga MX teams. And that was kind of fun. It was simple, but it wasn't grabbing anyone's attention. But those games were pretty poorly attended. Then in 2023, they switched up to this group stage where there was 3-team groups. I didn't really love that. I don't know, but the tournament itself was pretty popular. It was when Messi made his MLS debut, and it seemed like that was going pretty well. And then last year it kind of bombed because it just was, people weren't that excited about it. I know I went to I didn't go to all the games. I went to the first one, and then I went to the Galaxy game and the Pumas game. The Pumas game was, I wouldn't say the Pumas game was pretty fun. I guess I went to LAFC too. The Pumas game was fun, but the crowds were pretty thin in those games. And I don't know that this is going to get people any more excited. It's not, and notably, it's not included in the season ticket package. Any of the games won't be included in the season ticket package this year. The 18th game for the Sounders season ticket package is going to be Champions League. So I don't know. I don't think Leagues Cup is long for this world, but MLS seems committed to it. So we'll see. And then finally, the last piece of news this week is the SuperDraft was held on Friday. The Sounders picked 3 players, not that you would have known if you weren't online, because the only place that you could see this was a ticker. They weren't even streaming it this year. It was just a ticker that was on the league website. But the Sounders took 3 players. They took midfielder Ryan Baer with the 28th pick. They took defender Damian Alvarez with the 58th pick. and then forward Trace Terry with the 76th pick. I don't know a lot. I would be lying if I said I knew anything aside from what I've been able to quickly pick up from the internet, and as well as what a couple other folks told me. But Bear apparently is a number 6 who played at West Virginia. The Sounders were pretty fond of his ability to cover ground, the tenacious player, and the Defiance needed probably someone with a little bit more grit, and potentially he's a kind of player who could pair with a Snyder Brunell and be a little bit more of a steel-edged player, as they say. Alvarez is someone who you might be familiar with if you're a big fan of the local soccer scene. He was the WAC Defender of the Year and his senior year at Seattle U last year. He also played for at least 2, if not 3 seasons at Ballard FC, and in fact, he was the center back partner for Leo Burney, who is just got signed to a Sounders homegrown contract, so they should know each other pretty well. Again, probably going to be playing at Defiance, although maybe that's where Leo Burney is going to be playing too. You have potentially a nice little. It'll be interesting to see how much Stuart Hawkins ends up there too, but we don't need to. We'll get into the whole Defiance thing right now. And then the other one was this Tracy. He was a junior at Bowling Green. He's a big-bodied player, good in the air. He had 12 goals. The Sounders seem to like his physicality, especially, but most likely he's going to return for his senior year, which is similar to the guy the forward they drafted out of University of Portland last year. Boba Fofana, I think is his name. Anyway, he broke his leg last year during a senior season, but I'm told he's going to show up with the Defiance in preseason. So we'll see how that works out. But basically, Tracy is a draft and follow kind of thing. If you're a hockey fan, that's a term you should know. But all 3 of these guys, I would assume, are going to be primarily focused on getting in with Defiance. The Sounders have not signed a draft pick to their first team since Alex Roldan in 2018. Kalani Kosa-Rienzi came pretty close to breaking into the first team last year, and who knows, he might make it this year, so that would sort of break the SuperDraft curse. But the Sounders do not sign players out of the draft to their first team almost at all anymore, but that doesn't mean that they can't do it in the future. They will probably be offered, I would imagine, Defiance contracts, and if they do well, who knows? All right, well, that's that. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been listening. I haven't done a lot of these sound bites episodes during the second half of the season. Part of that was because once Lobbying Scorchers joined the network, I just didn't feel compelled to add a lot more content, and I got a lot busier writing. But I am going to try to bring this back at least for parts of the preseason and off season. I'll probably do it a little bit more earlier in the year as well. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been a subscriber this year. We are closing the books on 2024, and Sounder at Heart's in a great place right now, frankly. We have about 2,600 paid subscribers. We have grown pretty rapidly. Even, from last year, I want to say we've picked up about 1,000 subscribers over the course of this year. Been blowing me away, frankly. It's been really, really satisfying. But at the same time, the only way that we're able to keep doing this is if we keep people renew, if we get new subscribers. And if you're listening to this, it probably means that you are already a paid subscriber. So I want to say thank you to making this possible. I want to encourage you to renew whenever that might be. And if you want to, we are still 5 days away from Christmas. And if you want to give the gift of a Sounder at Heart membership to the person that you love in your life, just go to the merch table that is on Sounder at Heart. Just go, there's a top nav bar. One of them says shop, I believe. And you click on that, and there is a link to buying a gift membership for someone, if that's something you're inclined to do. If you want to increase your membership, I believe that's something that we can figure out how to help you with. So anyway, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Full Pull Wines. And if you know anyone that wants to sponsor Sounder at Heart content, have them get in touch with me. I would love to hear from them. But anyway, thank you so much. This will probably be the last soundbite that we do of the year. I don't know what would compel me to come back that wouldn't also justify us doing a full No Sadietis episode. So anyway, thank you for listening. I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. And thanks to Lickett for producing this. We'll catch you next time.
We love you. Let's win another one.